Hello, my name's Lesley Atherton, and these are true-ish, mainly, recollections called Life Balance. When I was a teenager, I was politically and socially aware. I was an activist, committee member, and even chair of a large number of organisations, including local branches of Animal Aid, BUAV, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth and the Green Party. That was who I was, or who I wanted to be, and I was never going to change, or so I thought. It didn't take long for me to realise that I was truly useless as a public speaker and was too shy to effectively control meetings, not having the confidence that's grown gradually in recent years. So, though moving away from these years of social activism has not left me embarrassed or ashamed of my past, I nevertheless left them all behind without regret after a couple of years, with the exception of one organisation. I became fascinated with simplicity and the lifestyle movement, with their creed, to live more simply so others may simply live. Perhaps it was a family leaning towards asceticism that delighted my consciousness, and my having been duly impressed with my father's tales of secret devotional camping retreats within the ruined stone-built grounds on St Cuthbert's Isle, Lindisfarne. Like my father, I was determined to move away from materialism and towards something far purer. So, before I sealed the envelope containing my latest lifestyle movement membership cheque, I wrote a letter asking if they would publish a classified ad in their next mailing. Their newsletter was no glossy printed publication, just an A5 home-printed booklet, back in the days when home printers were the size of small cars. My ad was a simple statement, offering my services to other members of the organisation. Having lost the political drive necessary for sustaining life in the pressure group public eye, I was searching for a job or direction, basically something that would allow me to give, while simultaneously granting me something of what I myself lacked. Looking back, I know I was a little naive, and there were a multitude of dangers that I was both too young and too sheltered to anticipate. But I got lucky and received many genuine offers from decent folk. The most promising initially was an offer from a north-east yoga retreat, looking for a housekeeper/caretaker to live on site. In retrospect, I wish I'd taken them up on their generous offer, but at the time there was something discouraging about the occasionally nebulous wording of their letters. Another reply came from a large Victorian vicarage in Surrey, I think, where the family needed help with childcare and light domestic duties for a family of 8. I don't remember all the other offers, but after much consideration the decision was made that I'd move in with a slightly eccentric lesbian couple who'd located in the wilds of Yorkshire. While living with 42-year-old Annabel and 65-year-old Jane, who'd met at Green and Common at the peak of protests, I took on responsibility for their wind generator, their huge vegetable garden, their livestock and their home, while also attending conferences, events, displays, rallies and protests. 19 years old, living out of a rucksack, frequently starving and always cold, I was nevertheless doing something in this living through good times and bad times. One of the final events I attended with Annabel and Jane took place in a large park in a multi-ethnic area of south-central Manchester. The park was luscious and vibrant, filled with bright and colourful displays of public art amongst the mature oaks, sycamores and beech trees. The community centre hosting the conference of Women Working for Independence and Glory was nestled in a sunny corner of the park. It was a warm summer's day in the late 1980s. Political rejection of the Conservative Party and Margaret Thatcher had permeated deep into the bones of radical student-age kids at that time, and I was such a radical student-age kid. Yet I also was not such a kid, and felt increasingly alienated in a world which, far from being imbued with the love and joy I'd hoped for, was actually increasingly conflict-ridden and conflict-driven. That day, inside the community centre, the women attendees of all ages and races had one thing in common. All sought a better and safer world, and were strong and feisty enough to make the necessary sacrifices to fight for such a world. I, on the other hand, was uncomfortably out of my depth. At break time, desperate to escape the earnest determination of the women indoors, I eagerly gravitated towards the outdoor playground, where, in the relaxed sunshine of the male-run creche, I sang songs, finger-picked guitar, played with children and made them laugh with my extreme inability to juggle. I chatted easily with the politically correct young men whose partners were putting the world to rights. How I admired and longed to be one of the women still within that building, exploding with ideas and passion and commitment. But I wasn't like them. Instead, I walked the dogs, I prepared the food, I drew pictures and helped a boy colour within the lines. I wrote silly rhymes to make the little ones giggle. And I was happy for the first time in forever. And it was then that my epiphany crept up and shone down at me, right there in the blinding sunshine of that South Central Manchester park. Yes, I believed in that simpler life. Yes, I was idealistic and desired much of what the worthy women surrounding me also wanted, but I was no leader. I wasn't even a competent activist, and I was never a person who could encourage change on a global scale. I was a thinker and a feeler. I was not a doer like those women were, and my own rebellion had been a forced one, resulting in boundaries too large and energies too diffused. I knew right then that I needed to take control of my pathetic little efforts and put them to better use, to give my own real life some meaning. And here I am now, 30 or so years later. Thousands of mistakes have been made, but they've been more than balanced out by happy times and good decisions. And what have I learned from that teenaged idealism? Well, first I think I've learned that the confident young are truly blessed. Those I knew with what the Americans call street smarts had confidence enough to blag themselves into a bright, shining life full of adventure. And second, I've learnt that, though many people's worlds were huge, I needed more, or rather, I needed less. I have come to realise that I am something of an earth shrinker. Each time I made the decision to do something radical or something that mattered, a persistent voice inside me said, no, make your own rules, be your own person, and most importantly, start small, downshift, adapt. And no matter how substandard, weak or ideologically unsound it might be, that's what I've chosen to do. I may not earn much money, but my work fits around my children and gives me time to live. I may not own a large house in a prestigious area, but I have to confess that with everything else I have to do, I'd be unable and unwilling to spare the time to clean and maintain such a property. Anyway, my efforts are better and happier being spent elsewhere, on the children, on living, on what matters. As for the lifestyle or Live More Simply organisation, yes, it was one of the cornerstones of my young and idealistic life, and I'm delighted to report that I've come full circle. Horace Dammers founded the organisation while Dean of Bristol Cathedral in 1972. His 2004 Guardian obituary tells that his wisdom, humour and faith hinted at the life of a 20th century St Francis. And one of this great man's first postings was an Anglican curacy in Adlington, my hometown. So though it could be considered that I have let this beloved cause down by compelling my house to become crammed with multiple possessions, and far, far more than the rucksack's worth I carried around as a youngster, I know that it doesn't matter. Life is good. We make our own simplicity. Not everyone's made for asceticism and the role of a solitary, just as not everyone can succeed in politics or social reform or anything else for that matter. We have to know our limitations and learn from our pasts. I am not a fake. I'm not unhappy with my lot. Neither am I rejecting what I used to be. It's just that I've come up with a livable balance between simple and contemporary, between past and present and future. Because it is irrefutable that the only place we can all live in and must all live in is the present. But it is necessary also to remember that the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. The Go-Between by L.P. Hartley.